that you watched have been to, so you can come and ask any questions. So I'm putting in the chat right now the link to our website where you can go down and register for any other additional sessions or the Friday office hours. So we'd love to see you. We aren't going over very much during this session on how to like get access to SAS and some kind of basic introductory information on SAS. We have a video for you, as well as you've got access to that YouTube video, as well as the like code and presentation specifically for that. So if you have any questions on how to get access to SAS or SAS Online, you can go reference that video. Please stay till the end of this session because I will be giving an attendance survey at the end. This will take you no more than 5 minutes. We just want to get your feedback on this session and what you want to see from us and what you want to see from us going forward, as well as it enters you into a raffle to win a $75 gift card to Amazon. Emily asked the questions if you can't make it to those sessions. The recordings will be available in a couple of, like in about a month. So we are doing recordings of every single video. And then once all the sessions are done, we do add them to that same website I gave you, sent the link in the chat. If you go there, you can actually scroll down and see the videos from last year or from last CU Data Week from last year. If you wanted to look at things that we did last year, but yeah, all of these recordings will be available in like about a month or two. Awesome. Okay, and then I'm going to put another link in here if you haven't already have access to, but there are the code that is going to be going over through today. And the presentation will be available after the session in our Dropbox. So you can just go to that Dropbox that has access to the two intro videos for SAS and R, or the intro documents for both of those, as well as there's a week 1. And then I'll be adding week 2 at the end of this week to have access to all of the documents for next week's sessions. And I will then hand it over to Crystal to do basic data management in SAS. We're so excited to have her present today.
Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and get things set up really quick. And hopefully you guys are seeing the first slide of the presentation. Yes? Perfect. Thank you. So, well, good afternoon and welcome everyone. Again, my name is Crystal Nabik and I'm really excited to guide you through just some basic data management using SAS. Again, like it's been indicated, this session is part of the CU Data Week. And today we'll focus on how to access and manage the data efficiently using SAS tools, especially for those who are new to SAS or looking into solidifying their foundation skills. So we'll just kind of get started. So here's a little bit of our agenda today. So we're going to start with a brief understanding of what SAS is and the different ways to access it. Then we'll dive into some of the basics of data type operations, setting up a working directory. And from there, we'll look at how do you import data, do some variable transformations, and then exporting those results. So by the end of this session, hopefully you'll have a strong understanding of how to handle data in SAS. And then if you have any questions, please feel free to ask at any time. But I do have moments too where I will pause during our SAS code and just check in as well. So a little bit about what is SAS. Some of you guys might have seen this from the introduction, but I thought it was worth going through just in case. So SAS, which stands for Statistical Analysis System, it's a powerful suite of analytics software used for working with data, and it allows you to access, manipulate, analyze, and report data efficiently. At its core is the base SAS, a flexible program language with a wide variety of procedures or proc statements. We'll get into that a little bit more. That will make it easy to accomplish different data tasks. So whether you're a beginner or advanced user, SAS provides a wide range of analytical and data processing tools. So here we've talked about, how to access your data, how to manage that data, how to analyze some of that data, and then creating reports. And again, it's a very flexible program language, and there's a huge selection of different types of procedures that can be used. A lot of resources available online. So how do you access the SAS products? There are 3 different types of products, 3 main ways to access SAS, depending on your need and resources. There's SAS Studio, part of the SAS On Demand for academics. It is a free web-based platform that's perfect for beginners. Those requiring a little bit more robust setup, there's the window environment. It's a licensed version. That's what I will be using today that provides a more traditional kind of desktop setup or interface. And then finally, there's a SAS Enterprise Guide. It's a kind of a point-and-click tool and ideal for both non-programmers and more advanced users to perform different types of analyses. So choosing an option that aligns with your workflow and experience level. And here's kind of just a little summary comparison of what you get kind of with your SAS Studio versus the Windows environment and the Enterprise Guide. Okay, so kind of moving on a little bit about understanding data in SAS. And how to think about your data. So in SAS, we work with 2 main types of data, a character or numeric. That character data includes text fields like names or status, while the numeric data represents values that you can calculate, such as age or dates. So understanding these these types help us structure and analyze data effectively. In terms to remember are the data set, observation, and variable, which we'll talk a little bit more as we go through the data. And these correspond to what's like a table, a row, or columns in your data set. So for example, in our data set, each participant has an observation and their attributes such as age or smoking status variables. We have kind of a little bit of some just examples such as like a name, which is your character, your age, which in this case is numeric, and the date. And then some operations that's used in SAS. So here are some key operations in SAS focusing on arithmetic and comparison operators, which we'll see the examples in just a few minutes. And it's essential for data management. The SAS operation allows us to perform calculations and comparisons. The arithmetic operations such as add and multiply handle mathematical operations, while the comparison operators like greater than or equal to will let us filter or compare the data. For instance, to identify mothers who are smoking more than 10 cigarettes a day, or we could write, cigarettes per day greater than 10. So these operators are foundational to tools in the SAS programming, and it will enable us to use powerful data manipulations or gathering information. There are so many more operations than are listed in these tables. And when you look at the slides, there is a link there to explore a little bit further. And now, so we'll dive a little bit into SAS, but I want to quickly review a little bit of the data set we're going to be looking at. Okay, so we'll focus on maternal and neonatal health. We have variables such as infant weight, maternal age, smoking habits, education levels. And this data set will help us explore how to clean, transform, and export data into SAS. Remember that it's important to never overwrite or alter your raw data set directly. So instead, we're going to create new variables and data sets as needed so that we preserve the original file. And as we work with the data, there are 2 critical rules to follow. First, never modify that raw data set and always keep it intact. And second, avoid overwriting original variables. Create new ones instead. These practices will ensure good data integrity and make it easy to trace your steps back if you need to. So good habits like these are the cornerstone of effective data management. So we will leave our presentation and we will kind of head into the SAS. And again, this is the Windows environment. Just a quick check, a thumbs up if you guys are seeing the SAS window. Perfect, thank you. So here, what we have, so I kind of have my window open. We have this one, okay? The top kind of window is our log. It's going to indicate whether a process went through or was there an error. We will have an output window that's going to show some results. And then right down here where it's kind of starting with that green text, this is my program. So this one has been already kind of start, but you can obviously add in things if you needed to. And over here toward the very left, this is our libraries. And I wanted to have that up so we can kind of see what was going on as we are importing and exporting data. So I'm going to keep that up because we'll probably touch in a little bit so you can see what's going on. So we've talked a little bit about, with the interface of SAS. Now, obviously, your SAS Studio versus your SAS window environments will look a little bit different, but not drastically. So as we talk about within the SAS windows in the interface, I showed that we had our program editor, which is this window. I talked about the log and the results and our Explorer window with the files. Okay. And then, so these windows and tabs. So this particular one where we're going to write our program in the editor, and this is our code piece, then we're going to submit that program. And we will read the contents of the log, so that's going to be in here, to make sure that are there any errors or warnings that we need to be concerned with? Do we need to edit something and then resubmit? Then we'll view the output in the results window and continue on with programming and resubmit after each step. So you kind of keep going through these steps 1 through 4 as you work through your process of whatever you're trying to accomplish with your data set. So now switching a little bit about working directories, which I know is a real crucial piece as we are bringing in data and exporting it. So we're going to talk about the data sets and where they're stored in the SAS libraries, okay? So the SAS library is a set of SAS files, data sets that are stored in the same location. So libraries are permanent except for those that are automatically put into the work library. So if you look over here in Explorer, it has a work folder. These are going to be anything housed in here temporary. So the minute you close your SAS program or window, those files will no longer be accessible. And then SAS libraries then can be referred to with different types of nicknames if we would like. And then SAS will automatically create the following libraries at the start of each set, like the work, the help, and the user. We kind of see that here, work, help, and user. And then all SAS data sets will have the following like 2-level names. So we'll have a library that's a reference to a data set, and that gives your location and the name of the data set. So we have a couple examples. So if I had maybe a data set called trial, that's in the work folder. So the folder, the library reference is listed first, followed by a period, and then the name of the data set. Then there's user-defined libraries if you want to work with different library data sets. So there's more of a library name and a global statement. So let's kind of look a little bit about how we're going to actually do this with our example data sets. So we will create a parent folder within the file. That's going to be our home. And then we're going to add and create some code within that to upload our files. Now, we can either do this in the SAS Studio or the SAS Windows. And you can see how, based on the environment that you're using, how you're interacting, it's going to slightly adjust, but not drastically. I mean, we're talking a difference from SAS Studio, which is going to use a path route, versus the route for the Windows environment. So I'm going to tell SAS where my path is. So I'm going to highlight this code. And the little running icon up here, that's our submit. I'm going to click that. Okay. So we see that it added this. All right. Now what I want to do is assign that library reference name like we had talked about. So here, I'm going to pull this up really quickly. So here's my folder. And this was the path I just pulled up. And I need to tell it, hey, I've got these two files. I need you to be able to access it. So that's written right here. And I'm going to run it. And here we go. So now it has access to these files. And now you can see it in our Explorer. Here's our data clean folder and our data raw folder. So I'm going to move down to let's import and read different files into SAS. So the first one we're going to start with is a CSV file. So we're going to tell it to import. And here we'll add the file. So it's like, okay, here's our root that we had talked about up here. Okay, and it's like, I need you to go into the data raw folder, and this is the data set I'm looking for. And we're going to tell it to come out. We're going to store it in that data raw file. And this is the name of the SAS file we're going to give it. We're telling it that it's a CSV. All right. And it tells how the first row of the data is the variable names. So it's like get the names. And then to examine the different rows and determine the variable type. So I'm going to highlight this code. And we're going to run that. Okay. You can see that the error log is working and it was successfully created. There are over 50, or there's 50,000 observations and 12 variables. And I want to show you when I pull up the file, just not doing it right now, it is actually, doesn't want to pull it up. It is stored in the raw file. Let's go here really quick. There it is in Explorer. Now, taking that same file, but I'm going to bring it in as an Excel format. So it's originally saved as Excel. You need to bring it into SAS. So again, it's going to look very familiar from what we did with the CSV. Here's our root path, but this time we're going to say put it in the work folder located in the SAS reference, and it's an Excel, and also get those names so that it knows that that first row is our variable names. So I'm going to highlight that, hit my run statement. And it was successful. Now, just to show you, if we go back into our active libraries, I'm going to click on work, and here it is. So it's called birth WT _E for Excel. Okay. There are additional options you could add. So let's say you have an Excel file that has several different sheets, but you only want a particular sheet. You can add in different options that say use this sheet or grab in these data rows. So what if I have a text file? Again, your import statement is going to look very similar to what we've been looking at. Okay, so I'm going to say, hey, go back to that data raw file. I want you to look for this particular text file. We're going to put it, I'm not telling what folder to put. It's kind of a default. So you're going to see it's going to go right into this work reference folder. And telling it is a text file, what to grab, and setting the delimiter to be a common file. So I will highlight that, click run. And you can see it's now added that birth weight data set. It's this one with the T. So I'm going to pause right here to see if there are any questions at this time. Looks like everybody's doing good. Okay, so let's move on to a little bit more of SAS programming basics. So we're going to look at kind of the sequence of one or more steps and discuss a little bit of a data set versus a proc step. So your data step is going to help read and write data and create or modify the data sets, where your proc steps is your procedure steps, and that typically processes the SAS data sets to produce something in the report that we want to look at. So right here is an example of a data set. So we're going to take that birth weight file that we have, and I'm going to set it at what's called a data set 1. So again, leaving that raw data set, but I want to set it as a data set I'm going to work with. Okay, and now you can see that the data set 1 right here, it's now set up in my work file. And let's say, okay, now I've imported my data, but let's take a look at what that file looks like. You can click on this and you can kind of get a brief view, or we can use a proc step and say, show me the contents in this data set. And here we go. So a little bit about the data set. It's telling me that it is located in our work library. It's a data set 1. It has 50,000 observations and 12 variables. Great way to check to make sure if your data is imported correctly. And then down here, it's going to tell me these are the variables. Here's its name. Over here, you have the type, like ID in this case is a numeric variable. And it gives a little bit of other information. So it's just kind of a nice snapshot of your data set. Over. So let's go back to our program. Let's say, I want to verify that the first 15 observations were read correctly. So again, we're looking at a proc statement. I'm just going to say, take this data set 1. I'm going to add a title. We'll talk a little bit about that, but it's going to help as you're reading your output if you can title things, because your reports will get long as you continue to build them. So here we go, just a brief snapshot. Obviously, I don't want to look at 50,000 variable observations, but I want to say, just give me a few. I want to make sure this is coming in correctly and that I have the ability to do so. And you can see here, by the way, that window that we were looking at for the Explorer in the different folders, that's also where your results are going to be. So having this, you can expand out. So let's say I wanted to go back and look at something. I can click on that and look at different attributes, and it will pull it up on my results. So it's a great way to navigate your output as well. So looking a little bit further, so step boundaries, so that each step begins with either the following: is it a data statement or is it a proc statement? And then specifying the type. And then SAS is going to detect the end of a statement when it encounters. So at the end, you might have noticed that I had something like a little statement here called run, or you can use quit. And that lets it know that that particular statement that you're coding for is done. That piece is done. It knows to stop there. And a little bit about the color coding as we look at the program. So as you can see, this aspect, it's green, and it's telling SAS this is a comment. You don't need to do anything. You're not running a procedure. I'm just making some kind of information for myself, or as a reference of this piece of code does this, any other kind of text that you may want to clarify. If I have a light blue, it's going to be a keyword that's meant to define. We'll see that in a second. A dark blue is going to be commands. Blacks are going to be arguments with options within a code. Magenta are going to be things that are within quotes. Red could be an error that's detected by SAS. And then you'll have like an aqua kind of color, which is a number. And a little bit on capitalization. So SAS is not case sensitive unless it's within quotes, whether they are double or single quotes. And then spacing, best practices, there's no hard rules, but a new line for a statement, spacers in between steps, and then indents. And we'll see as we're building this code a little bit what I mean by indenting and then adding new lines in between statements. Any questions at this point? Okay. So as we're moving forward, so we have this data set, and let's talk about maybe some of the things we want to do with this data set. And so in this particular example today, we're going to base it on the data and research goals of converting a mom education level variable into a character variable. So how do we change that? Calculating BMI from the height and weight, and then creating a BMI category. So we'll go from that variable to we'll categorize that BMI. We'll assign a birth weight as a binary variable, which is a 0 or a 1. We'll create a dummy variable for self-identified race. Then we will label variable names and just a couple simple statistics for the BMI. So let's talk a little bit about converting a numeric variable to a character or vice versa. So a character to a numerical variable. And why might you want to do that? You may want to conduct calculations. And so it's going to need to be numeric, such as height and weight and lab values. And we'll talk about the input function, about creating a new variable, because again, kind of going back to what we said in the beginning, we don't want to overwrite that original variable. We want to create a new one so that we always retain the original information. And then going from numeric to a character variable. So you may want to retain the number, but not needed in terms for calculations or continuous treatment, such as a zip code, an MRN number, a street number, or to treat it as an ordinal variable. So we'll have a put function where you can say, here's the new variable, take whatever variable I'm wanting to adjust or modify, and maybe specify a length. So in our first example, we're going to go back to that birth weight data set. So I'm saying, here's that data set from that library that we had. Okay, we're going to set it called birth weight without the C. And I'm going to say, take that mom level education, all right, and we're going to change it from numeric to a character variable. All right, and if I take here is our data. And so here we have that mom level education. You can see that it was numeric. And now it's taken that variable and now it's telling you it's taken the number, but it's considered now a character instead of a number. And that's simply how you do that. And so you're talking about, I see it in the chat, what's the difference between a new variable and a put variable? So the put function is basically telling it to take this variable and that's how we're going to take that numeric to put it to a character versus the input of taking a character to a numeric value. So now we're going to want to create new variables. So I'm going to close this data set. All right, I'm going to take that birth weight. And again, because I'm modifying it, I don't want, even though I've adjusted the last one, I'm going to create a new data set where I will modify the BMI without changing my last data set in case I have to reference it for any other reason. So we're going to set it as a new data set. So we're going to call it birth weight 2. Then we're going to calculate the BMI from the height and weight. So we take that mom's height, take the mom's weight, we do the calculation. And so you can see here I've put it's in green, so it's telling me what this piece of code is. It's just a nice way to clarify things instead of having 15 lines and it's like, okay, what is this piece of code doing? I'll write a piece of code and then I'm going to annotate exactly what it is to do. Especially if I have to review this, maybe I'm working with another statistician and saying, you know, I've written this code, this is what I wanted it to do, and you can easily walk through the procedures that you've taken. So that's why we're going to calculate the BMI. Here we're going to categorize it. So we're telling it to create a new variable of BMI categorize. And here are the different categorize based on the numbers. Okay, is the BMI less than 18.5? Is it between 18.5 to 25? If so, then we're going to categorize it as a healthy weight. If it's greater than 25 but less than 30, it's going to be considered or classified as overweight. Anything else that we have not indicated, we are going to classify it as an obese range. And then, of course, it'll be helpful to label our variables to say the mom WT is the mom's weight. We have mom HT, which is the mom's height. And then we have this variable called weight, and we're just labeling it as newborn birth weight. So in this code, we are running 3 different things to this data set 2. And then at the end, we close it off with a run statement. I'm going to highlight all that. I'm going to click run. And everything's been processed. We can see that we have more variables now. Everything is in black in our log, which is good. That means we don't have any errors. Everything's run nicely. And if you want to, again, you can always open up that file if you'd like and just see. Let's take a look. So I noticed that we're missing some height in one of the variables, so it couldn't calculate BMI, and therefore your BMI category is missing. And then I am going to just scroll down a little bit. And for those that did have a height and weight, the BMI is calculated and then is categorized in the range. So that's what it did to the data set with those pieces of code that we just ran. Now let's kind of go on to something a little bit different, creating a dummy variable or indicator variables. So again, taking that birth weight 2 that we've kind of done some of those modifications, I'm going to create a third data set. Again, is it necessary? No, but it is helpful if you do ever have to go back a step. And we're going to look at that birth weight, and we're going to do a more binary variable and kind of break it into a low birth weight or a high birth weight. Then we're going to have a 2-step process. So we're going to look at that birth weight. Then our next one is going to be a self-identified race as a dummy variable. Kind of pulling this up really quick just so you can kind of see what it looked like. So we had this category of race, self-identified race, and all that information is located in one variable. Now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of break out these categories so that they're each their own. And that's what it's indicating here. So we're going to create a variable called Asian and then Black. As indicated, and it's going to look for within that race variable these particular characters. Now again, if this is case sensitive, so you'll want to be careful. So if you have something that's identified as Black, or let's say there was another adjustment as African American, you would need to do those separately. And do you want to put them in one category? Do you want to have them separated as 2? So something to think about. And then we're going to label that low birth weight that we're calculating up here to indicate what it is. Just gives it a label so that when you get your reports, you don't always have to remember exactly what the variable name is as what it's referencing. Because what the weight, is it the mom's weight? Is it the infant weight? Adding a label will help clarify that. So again, everything's been run. We can see that now we've had more variables to our data set, still the same amount of observations. And again, as we ran the statement, everything has gone through well. And I can honestly tell you, probably the biggest thing I tend to run in with code is forgetting a period or a semicolon. And that's where, if you notice, let's say I'm going to take, see what happens if I take that one out and I try to run it. I'm just going to run this really quick. There's that error statement we talked about. You're going to see it in red. It doesn't quite understand what you're asking it because we took out that semicolon. So I guarantee you, if you have an error, that's probably one of the first places you're going to want to look. Okay, so now that we wrote all that, let's take a look and check those new variables and see how that now looks in our data set. Again, we can run a proc statement to print out some of the observations. In this case, I only want to see the first 2. Or again, you always have the option to pull up the data set if you'd like. But if I just want to do a simple check on my data, I'm going to run that. And I'm going to bring this over really quick. And now you can see for those first 2 observations, this is what it was the last time we checked the data set. Now we have more information where we see that low birth weight. and how that original race variable has been broken out into its own variables. And it's going to categorize it as a 1 or a 0. So in this case, they identified as Asian. So we have our Asian indicated variable here. So that's why it receives a 1. And then you have 0 for everything else. Same thing for observation 2, originally indicated as white. So we have our 1 indicated under the white variable, and 0 is indicated for every other race that we had categorized. Let's talk a little bit about our title statement. So you can see when you don't change, that title that I had originally set early on will come through, or it won't label it at all. So maybe I want to use the title statement to indicate additional information. So I'm going to go here, close it off. Now you can see when you don't set a title, how there was nothing in our result file. But here, when you set a title, it'll come up. And so it'll let me know, hey, I'm looking at this data set. Just helps to break up a little bit of your result file. And two, if we look at here on the left screen in that menu, remember I told you how it's kind of easily, you can reference back to different things. When you don't have it, it's going to look like this in your output, versus where if I've labeled it, I know exactly what this piece of code I want to look at. And it, like I said, it gets helpful when your list gets really long to be able to quickly reference back. So something else you might be interested to look at is a frequency count for the BMI categories. Okay, now that I've been able to categorize it, what are those frequency counts? How do I obtain that? So we're going to do something called proc, and then it's short for frequency. We're going to pull up this data set called birth, and we are using the birth3 data set because that's the one that we made those changes in. All right, I'm going to want a table having those categories that were created. And then I'm giving that a table a title. All right, we have our run statement. And I should indicate that this title down here kind of helps close that off so that that title doesn't keep getting repeated on other tables that it's not applicable to. I'll highlight that, run, and here we go. So I have my table of BMI categories, my frequency counts. So for healthy weight, just under 15% of our observations fall within that category. We know that we do have some missing. We saw that in the beginning. So we know that there's some missing height. That's why it wasn't calculated. And then our other categories. I also like looking at my frequency table, especially if I've done any calculations to see, was the calculation done correctly? Do I have a high amount of missing? Why might I have a high amount of missing? And take a look at what's going on with that data file. So it's a great way to kind of pause and check on your data before moving forward. So let's talk about, maybe I want to, instead of a frequency, I want to calculate the means for a data set. Again, you're looking at a particular category and you want to check for missing, or is anything particularly out of range that might need any kind of adjustment or additional modifications or a code to indicate. Let's say I have a lab value that is unrealistic. Then I might want to check what exactly might be the reason for that extremely high number. Is it supposed to be a missing code? Is there an issue with that lab value? Something to check in on before I start to do any type of analysis that could potentially be inadequate or not correct to do. So I want to look at kind of mom smoking. And one of the things I want to do first is, let's say I need to sort my data set by mom smoking. It's a binary variable of yes or no. So let me do that first. We'll sort that out. And hit run. And it sorted that data. And then I'm telling it proc means, grabbing that data set. I want to do the means by the category of whether mom smokes or not. And in this particular case, I'm going to look at the variable of mom weight gain. So again, it's by, does the mom smoke? What is the mom's weight gain? And then I'm going to title it. We'll run this piece of code. So kind of looking again at the results file. So here we go, mom smokes. If it's 0, in this case, it's a no. If it's a 1, it's a yes. And I can look at the number of observations. What are the means? And then again, in this one, we're just looking at standard deviation, a minimum and maximum value for that weight gain. Again, it's a really good check just to see if your variables are in line with what they're supposed to be. Another thing you may have to do is potentially dropping an unnecessary variable to improve efficiency or clarity. I know in my particular case, sometimes I will modify very big data sets or I'll merge data sets. But when I go to turn that over to the statistician who's going to be analyzing the data, she may not want a data set with 800 variables in it. She's going to want what's necessary to her. And so I may reduce that down to the top 20 that's she needs to look at. Or you've built variables off of previous ones, they're no longer needed, so you'll want to clear that out. So now that we're going to make a modification of removing variables, I'm going to set another data set. This is our fourth reiteration. So I'm taking my birth weight 3. I'm telling it to drop the weight gain. And we will run that. Okay. So I just want to look very quickly at the log. And we know that, over here we had 21 variables. I did drop 2 variables. So now I'm down to 19. Again, I haven't lost any observations. And if you want to look a little bit on our data set 4, this is how the data set's kind of looking. I'm a visual person. That's why I like to look at these. I know it's not always necessary. I love my programs, and it's great when you want to add some additional observations and rerun this stuff for anything that you've added. But I do also like to check, see what those programs look like. So now I've made all the modifications and corrections that I needed to. Yes, I am demonstrating 2 ways to drop. You are correct. So we can look at different ways of doing this. You'll find that in a lot of the SAS code, there are several different ways. I mean, I showed you how to import via code. You can also import dropdown and going through a different process. So there's never one way to specifically do something. Sometimes you'll see that there are 2 different approaches depending on what you may want to accomplish. I will tell you that sometimes if I'm dropping a bunch of variables, I like to list them out. It's just a personal preference. So sometimes it's easier to do it that way versus always writing everything long. So now that I've had my data set modified to the way I like it, it's clean, I'm happy. I now want to export that data set. So I'm going to say take the work data set, birth weight 4, and then I'm going to put it into back to those files that we originally had that we indicated early on, put my clean data set there. Because remember, if you don't save your work data set file, then you're going to lose it and you'll have to rerun all this again. Okay, the good news is everything was exported successfully. And if I was to go back out, remember how we talked about these were the files that I was bringing stuff in? Now I have my nice clean file, which is actually, it's not going to show you here because it is a different format. It's no longer a SAS format. It's a CSV format. So we've taken that CSV, we brought it in, we cleaned it up based on certain things we wanted to accomplish. Now that we have done that, we have exported out a nice, clean, updated file as a CSV. And again, you can take those same things that you saw for importing to export it out, whether you want it to be an Excel or text file. And you can also export or save them as SAS files if you want to continue to use SAS. So I know that was kind of a lot to review. I do want to take some time really quick, again, to remind people about the attendance, contest entry to make sure that you're put in for the raffle.
I have
And
added the link to the chat. So
just briefly to review a couple things. So there is a lot of wonderful documentation out there. When you guys have access to these presentation slides, you can click these links to dive a little bit more and then also look at the SAS communities, because SAS does offer a wealth of resources to support you. The official SAS documentation is comprehensive and a great place to start. The SAS community forums are another valuable resource where you can ask questions, share knowledge with other users. And remember that even experienced programs rely on these tools, so don't hesitate to use them as you grow your SAS skills. And let's see. How are we doing here? I will say one of the things when I first started, especially, there's a lot of things you'll come across. The online resources are really good. One of the other things I started with, and of course it's going to blur it out, is the little SAS handbook. I have the 5th edition, but there's a 6th one. So for those people who like books as well as online resources, that's available. Again, I find that great because there's so many different scenarios that come up for data sets. It's nice to be able to reference that. And I just want to pause for a little bit. I know we have some time if there are any questions. Otherwise, I have another little piece we can dive into if we want, looking at merge data, because that's probably one of the other big aspects in data management that you'll be doing at some point is merging different data sets together. So if there isn't any other questions, I can kind of move forward and talk a little bit about that.
I just want to come in and say it looks like the link that I gave you, the link that I have specifically for this attendance link survey, is for advanced reporting in R. Still complete it. I'll let our administrator know that it got switched. That was so still complete it specifically for this course, and I'll let our administrator know, and we'll make those changes on the back end for us. But yes, still complete the survey.
Okay. So since we have a few minutes, like I said, let's talk just briefly a little bit about the merge data. And I just want to verify that you still see my SAS screen, hopefully. Okay. So I have a couple files, dataset 1, dataset 2. And what I want to do is called a one-to-one merge. So we're going to combine observations from these data sets. Again, data merging is probably one of the more common things to do. So I want to show you briefly what dataset 1 looks like, what dataset 2 looks like. All right. So here I have 10 observations, kind of using a little bit of the birth weight that we've been looking at, the dataset we were working at, and saying, you know what? I want to add in this county information. It's going to amend that data set. So I'm taking merge data set 1 and 2 to create a data set called data new. We'll run that. They were all put together and it's going to look like this. So now we've added that county to this data set. But what happens, and again, you can look at it on the variable view table, or you can do a quick little print, as we've done before, taking a look, which will be helpful as we compare. So this is what a data set that's combined is going to look like. But what happens if I have a data set where I need to do a match merging? And I'll take, for example, let's say you have encounter data from EMR encounter dating, and I have another file that talks about demographics. So maybe I want to bring those together, but I've got to match them. So what you do is you're going to take your data set 1 and 2, like you saw. This time I'm going to say match it by a variable called common. And just again, kind of looking at here, there was something called a common variable. I'm going to pull up these two data sets so that you can see what I'm referencing. So it's going to match it on this and this from these two data sets to bring it together and what that's going to look like. Okay. So when we just combined without asking a match, it looked like this. When we match it on that common ID, now it's going to look a little different as it's trying to line up those A's and B's and C's. I just used letters. So sometimes if it wasn't in one file, but it's in the other, it's going to sit there and kind of more stack that data on top of each other. It's different ways to merge. There are a lot of ways to merge, but these are just two examples of things that you can do with your data set and what that code looks like. And I have things about how to rename a variable. If I take that data set and I want to change, instead of calling it a common, maybe I want to change it to new common ID. How might that code look like? So again, you just add the rename statement. You can see that highlighted in that blue. These are this is the variable to pull from. This is the new variable I'm creating in a new version of the data set. And then we'll take a look at what that looks like. So now, when you rename, you can see our previous data set just had common. Now it's now referred to as new common ID, which is a great way to clarify different variables, especially as you're maybe creating some and you want to clarify what that actually is in relation to. So again, that's just other pieces that you might need to do as you are cleaning up and bringing data together. And that is all I have to share. Are there any other questions at this time? We've got a few minutes. Okay. Again, there is, you can always, there's a lot of resources within CETA. I believe they have office hours later this week on Friday, I believe.
Yeah,
And other
Friday.
ways to contact.
Thank you so much. It was a fantastic presentation. We all learned so much. Thank you so much, Crystal, for.
You're welcome. Good luck, everyone.